I think so. I've just chatted to. We are live now, so I'm hoping that Elke is going to be able to join us. Apologies for the slight delay this morning. Microsoft updates have caught me at a bad time. We are also currently waiting for Elke Travers to join as well, who was here. And who's struggling to get in this morning. So we are going to start a brief webinar this morning, specifically sponsored by Nestlé Professional and the Golden Chef's Hat Awards over in Australia, talking about stress and burnout. But before we get going, I would love my guests. Hopefully we can give Elke a bit of time to log out and log back in again. Al, would you mind starting with an introduction, please, sir?
Absolutely. My name is Alan Tompkins. I am Chief Ambassador for the Burn Chef Project. I was Australia's very first ambassador for the Burn Chef Project. I was a chef for 22 years until I burnt out of the industry, walked away from the industry. This was coupled with 30 plus years of my own mental health struggles, which I feel I have dual lived experience of being in hospitality and struggling with my mental health. I am now, believe it or not, working in mental health. And through the Burnt Chef Project, I'm now giving back to the industry, which really did give me every opportunity career-wise and just developing life skills, which beforehand I probably struggled with.
Thank you, Al. And Charlie.
Alrighty. Well, kia ora. My name is Charlie. I'm one of 3 ambassadors here in New Zealand. I joined the project about, pretty much the end of last year, so almost a year ago now. I've worked in, pretty much my entire career, I've been in hospitality, which, isn't that long really, but still all the work experience I have is in hospitality. I've been through many mental health challenges, both industry caused and personal related, but it's something that is very, near and dear to me, hence why I'm here today.
Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us this morning, guys. And again, apologies for the 20-minute delay. I'm hoping that Elke would also be able to find her way back into the room, as we've been hit by gremlins aplenty this morning. If not, then we will see how we go, and we'll see what we can do about making sure that this is repeated for those who aren't able to be here currently. So for opening questions and to set the scene, Alan, you mentioned that you had been impacted by burnout. How did impact burnout first sort of come along, and how did that you find the first signs of burnout appear within your work?
Look, I've got to be honest. I think pretty much for my entire career, I was very anxious and I would let stress get to me. Pretty much from day one. I think it's more in the later years when I started started studying mental health, and really sort of then, I suppose, listening to my own body and listening to myself more along the lines of noticing the little signs that maybe I was more stressed than I was giving myself credit for. I just always thought it was the industry and that was the way it is. And this is just one of the, I suppose, side effects of being in the hospitality industry.
Interesting. So there's a lot to unpack there. I mean, in terms of burnout, Charlie, have you had a similar experience of burnout whilst working in hospitality?
Yeah, no, definitely. The first time I guess I discovered burnout, so to speak, was when I was still in college. I'd have been year 12 or 13. I'm not sure what that relates to, like in England and everything. But so about 16, 17, it's my first proper hospitality job, and doing, late nights and then early mornings, and definitely burning the candle at both ends, as that's my mom's favorite saying whenever I get into that sort of point. So definitely that's the first time I kind of discovered what it was, because I got to a point where I was making myself physically like unwell. And it wasn't until I went to the doctors and he kind of went, hey, it's not that you're just sick, like you're actually burnt out. And that's when I learned the hard way what burnout really is. And I mean, that's minor, but I've had one of the major experience with burnout throughout my current career, which it's not a fun thing to go through depending on the level, at all. But
no, indeed, I think it's a good opportunity. Elke, hello. So we've been hit with a multitude of technical difficulties today, but you're here, you've made it, so welcome. And for the 50 or so people that are currently watching on LinkedIn and copious others on other platforms, do you mind just giving yourself a quick introduction, and then I'll pose the same question or repeat the same question for you?
Yep, sure. Hi, I'm Elke Travers, Nestlé Professionals Executive Chef. I'm here in Sydney, Australia, and I've been in the industry for over 35 years and still love it. Always cooking up a storm, and now with Nestlé Professional.
Amazing. Thank you very much. And I'll pose you the same question that I asked Al and Charlie, which was, in terms of experience of burnout, have you experienced burnout within hospitality? And if so, what did that start to look like, and how long ago was that?
I think, back when I first started, in apprenticeship days, I sort of more burnout, I suppose, because I just saturated myself with the industry, because that was my safe zone. So I took the kitchen on as my family, and it was my home and my safe place. I think my life at home was quite hectic and quite different, very stressful at home. So I think I just love working. So you just work a lot. Back in my early 20s, I would say I much better. So going through what, you get out of control and learning how to pull it back in. So burnout definitely was prevalent there in my early 20s.
It's interesting that so Elke, you mentioned that you loved working, and it was a nice little change of pace or an escape for you. And Charlie, now you sort of moved into hospitality and hadn't really been shown any differently in terms of actually self-protection mechanisms and looking after your own health well-being until it became too severe in terms of a medical intervention. Are there any stresses specific to the industry that you think were overlooked in the run-up to burnout, or anything that you wish you'd known differently? And Elke, unfortunately, has dropped off again, so we'll get her back in the conversation in a second. Alan, any particular stresses?
I think personally we all put too much pressure on ourselves when we're working in hospitality. There seems to be just this unwritten law where you've just got to work yourself to the bone, and you can't show any form of weakness. You can't complain about hours and things like that. And I think with me, a lot of it also came down to just not really switching off. So you would find yourself, even after you finish work, you'd already be starting to think about the next day. And then coupled with that, you'd also, on your days off, you'd be thinking about, when you were back at work, you were thinking about while you were away, what was happening, how busy were they, how big is the prep list going to be when you get back. And I just remember I was just always in that continual cycle of, if I wasn't at work, I was thinking about work. And I never really, it's not until now that I'm working in a different field where I've actually learned to be able to leave work behind and actually find myself in a place where I'm not thinking about work beyond, finishing at 4:30, 5 o'clock. And there's a lot of things like that I wish maybe I just was a little bit kinder to myself throughout my hospitality career, that I may have even still been in the industry now. I may have been able to prolong that career beyond 22 years. I'm showing my age considering I started very late in the industry, but I feel like I've learned a lot in the last 2 to 3 years about what not to do, and perhaps this is where I am at now with the Burnt Chef project, wanting to now educate especially younger chefs or people that are wanting to get into the industry how to look after yourself in the way where I just never looked after myself. So it's basically doing what I say and not what I did, as opposed to doing what I say and not what I do type thing. It's about prolonging the career of the new chefs coming in or the new hospitality workers coming in, prolonging a career of 2 or 3 years to then be able to see them in the industry in 10, 15, 20, even longer.
Yeah, longer term sustainability. And Charlie, what about yourself? So in terms of sort of recognizing the early signs of that and starting to combat that, what have you learned over the sort of last few years?
In terms of like combating and, well, yeah, awareness is a massive part. So being aware and being able to just know the signs and the symptoms and all that sort of stuff. But one massive thing is just mental well-being, and mindfulness is a massive part for me. And this is something which I was into before the Burnt Chef project, and then the Burnt Chef project taught me some of this stuff as well. But even just taking a step back, especially in, busy service or anything like that, being able to just take a step back just for a few seconds and sort of gather yourself. Especially, one thing that I've found, I don't have as many years experience necessarily in this industry, but one big thing that I've found is the physicality of the industry as well, especially like my background and my current job in the industry is all service-based, front of house based. So constantly, 9, 10, 11 hours running around different tables, running food, anything like that, being in the bar, making drinks or helping out in the kitchen, anything that I need to be, just bouncing around so much, and being able to take that step back and just going, even just 5-10 seconds, taking a step back and just looking, going, okay, cool, this is what's going on, this is what I've got, I'm fine, and going with it like that. That's one, sort of big thing that I've found, definitely in terms of mindfulness and just being able to be present in the moment, just reeling yourself back in.
That's a really good point, Charlie. So I guess as a follow-on for that and for both of you, are there any specific techniques that either of you are using and that can run the audience through that have managed to help you in terms of being present in the moment or understanding where some of those signs or symptoms of potential burnout are starting to incur and getting ahead of it before it becomes serious?
I have to say that, again, it comes down to, as strange as it may sound, it comes down to listening to yourself and being able to recognize even the smallest hint that you could be burning out or you could be under stress. When I was in the industry, I would find myself, if I was feeling stressed and overwhelmed, I would do the complete opposite to what I'm doing now. When I was in the industry, if I was feeling stressed and overwhelmed, I automatically tried to work harder and faster. And what I found was that would just compound and compound. Whereas now I've learned, and this is something that I would love to pass on to a lot of the younger hospitality workers, it's all about, as Charlie said, it's about just sort of taking that moment and stepping back. And you can actually do it without anybody else noticing. You can sort of step back, let's just say a young chef who is really feeling stressed, overwhelmed, the dockets are coming in. You can almost take that few seconds without anyone noticing. And that could be simply just stepping away from the stove for a second, and just taking some deep breaths. Or you could even probably do it whilst you're grabbing something from the fridge behind you. You could just take a few deep breaths whilst you're sort of reaching for your next item that you need to cook up. And these are things that, again, as I said, I wouldn't even thought about doing, whereas I would just be constantly just wanting to just keep going and keep pushing through it. Whereas you actually, and the more I sort of think about it, you actually find yourself, you will actually, more than likely, you'll end up going slower if you're overwhelmed and stressed and you try and go faster, because you're going to be trying to do more things at the same time. And the more I sort of think about it, more often than not, I wouldn't be doing any of those things productively at all. And hence, as I said, you actually will find yourself getting slower, and then you'll find yourself getting more overwhelmed rather than having that second to sort of step back, even reassessing the situation and just sort of even breaking down the steps even smaller, whether or not that involves sort of planning out what your next steps are by just concentrating on 3 dockets rather than trying to concentrate on the 408 dockets that are on the pass. And again, as I said, these are all the things that I never did and I never thought about. And it's only been in hindsight where I've given it a lot of thought about why are hospitality workers so stressed and so overwhelmed? And it's because we've always got to be on, we've always got to be moving. I think a lot of the time there's been a lot of that. If you've got time to lean, you've got time to clean type mentality as well. So it was always just, you just always need to be on the go, and you always need to be ready for whatever they're going to throw at you. And I think that's where it comes down to. It's about actually either stopping or slowing down, and you'll actually find that you will be less overwhelmed, and you will actually notice over time that you're actually moving faster and you're getting things done more because you've got more of a clear thought. I mean, it's not always going to be the case on a busy Saturday night. And as I said, you've got 400 doggets on the run, but yeah, that's where I see. I think sometimes it's a matter of actually stopping, taking a breath, and going a little bit slower, and you will actually find that it'll all start falling into place, and you won't feel as overwhelmed, and you'll get to the end of those 400 dockets quicker than you probably originally thought.
So breaking down tasks into bite-sized chunks rather than thinking about the bigger thing, because it's very easy to get overwhelmed if you start looking at the monumental tasks in front of you. But actually, if you can break that down into little, almost gamify it in a way. But I did like your quote: if you've got time to lean, you've got time to clean. And I just had a flashback to when I used to work in bars, and if you had spare time, it wasn't just a case of being able to talk or mingle with your peers. You had to polish the draft taps, or you'd have to start mopping the floor or whatever it might be. Elke, welcome back. I know that we are facing all the challenges here on a Monday. Before we ask Charlie the same question, I've asked both the guests what sort of signs they have experienced or become better at experiencing when it comes to chronic stress and potential burnout, but also what interventions that you can put in place now to start to tackle that and to try and to reduce the impacts of stress. Are there any specific signs and then techniques that you might use?
I think signs are when people are just not themselves. They might get really irritable or snappy, and sometimes they just blank right out. But management, like for me, what works for me, I find, is just start your best day with something that's really good for you. And I find a walk with my dog and a run sometimes, or a swim is key. So definitely exercise is key for me. That's what tends to work. And if I start my day where I can see the colour form in the sky, like it's really early, but I love seeing that colour. It's so gorgeous in the morning, and it gives me time to plan my day and to fit in everything that you've got, because it's not just work, it's family life too, right? And all these things that you've got to fit in your everyday norm. And then I like to try to end my day that way too, and check out the sun going down, or if you can, just something where you can reflect on that's what I do now. I think back when you're, driving into a new career, you're so busy, you often don't see daylight. You're often there at night, like in the dark of the early morning, and you can be there till dark again. So now I've learned that I do like to have a bit of a balance where, exercise is key. So,
Exercise.
yeah.
It's huge as well. It also improves. I was at a trauma conference fairly recently, and they said that exercise is known obviously to be physically beneficial for you, but it actually improves not just your serotonin, which is obviously that a hormone that makes you feel happy, but it also improves your neuroplasticity as well, so your ability to hold information and to learn. And it's really, really interesting. And I think someone referred to it as a dose of exercise, because you would take a dose of medicine, and exercise is medicine, so we should be taking doses.
And it snaps you out of that. You get you out of like your kitchen, so it'll give you that breath of fresh air where it's like, oh, actually the sun's out today. So if you're on those doubles or back to backs, and it just gives you that breathing space where you actually got outside to see what color the sky was. Because I don't know about you guys, but I know notoriously as a young chef, it was doubles, and it was starting before the sun was up, and you go home when it's moonlight, right? We used to say we had moonlight tans. So I think the industry's got a lot better, but that exercise or a walk or a breath of fresh air, whatever it is, I think it's really important.
Yeah, I agree. And Charlie, this is all bred of your recommendation of mindfulness. So I'm interested. Have you got any specific mindfulness techniques that you use to help ground yourself on a busy day?
So as I was saying before, like I'm not necessarily in the kitchen majority of the time. I'm out the front, and one big thing that it may sound silly, but the music, it's 100% what I will normally use to ground myself back in. I'll find myself quite often, say, if it's a night and we're kind of busy, and if I'm behind the bar or if I'm out the front or something, listening into the music gives me something to take my mind off. Okay, everything else is going on, bring myself back into this moment, and then, carry on with what I'm doing. Or a couple of our guys will laugh, not like in a laugh at me way, but we'll giggle a little bit, because if they come to collect drinks and I'm in the bar, they'll see me sort of not necessarily dancing, but you can tell that I'm working to the music. And that's one big thing that I've always kind of managed to do to bring myself back into the zone and not let myself like stress out, is just using that sort of little thing to bring myself here and being like, hey, cool, I'm here. This is what's happening. Take a step back, look at drinks, or look at the food that's coming up, or whatever's happening. Just look at what I've got and then go on from there. And I think following up with what Al said as well, with the breathing is definitely a big thing, and box breathing is one big thing. Like, for anyone that's watching that doesn't necessarily know box breathing, I know it is a common technique, but your whole breathe in for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, breathe out for 4 seconds, like that whole sort of thing. Even just doing that for, just a couple times just helps bring yourself back down to earth and kind of realize what's going on.
That's so powerful, and you beat me to the punch, I think, Charlie, because I was just about to start talking about box breathing techniques. And if anyone isn't familiar with box breathing techniques, you don't necessarily have to count. If you don't have access to a clock or a timer, you can look at corners of the room. But if you breathe in for around about 4 seconds slowly, you just hold your breath for 4 seconds, and then you let it out for 4 seconds, and then you hold your breath for 4 seconds, and then repeat that. It's amazing that actually when you check in with yourself after doing that, you feel all of that sort of that tenseness drop, and your thought processes start to clear a little bit. It's an incredible technique that I just don't think we give the basic art of breathing enough kudos. And there's breathwork coaches all around the globe now who are doing phenomenal work and getting people to work with their sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. But we're never taught to breathe. So if we actually think about that, we've never actually had any lessons on how to breathe effectively to be able to bring your body into a state of arousal for things like service, and then to bring it back down again to enable you to help you get sleep and to be able to think a little bit clearer. So it's a really, really good point, Charlie. I like that a lot. Thank you. So from an organizational point of view, then, Charlie and Al, and obviously we've been working with Nestlé now for quite some time now. I would say just coming up to a year. Are there any particular tools or resources that you found from the Burnt Chef project or any other organization that have helped you understand more about this subject matter? Elke, as you've been dipping in and out, we'll go with you first, if that's okay.
Sorry, what's out of the Burnt Chef partnership?
Are there any specific tools or resources that either you or any of the community, the Nestlé professionals community, have found that have been beneficial to them to understand the subject of stress, mental health, well-being, or burnout?
I know it's a great tool for us to be able to give chefs, like if they need to put their hand up for help, it's a tool that we can say, listen, these guys are professionals. They've got you covered. They've got solutions. They're like-minded people. They understand a chef, and it's a great way that it gets them outside of their group of network and talks to professionals. So just having that, it's so valuable because we just know how overwhelmed mental health, providers in Australia, they're just pulling their hair out. They need help. So having one that targets to hospitality and burnt chefs, like-minded people, chefs like talking to chefs, and hospitality people get hospitality. So I think it's a really good platform to encourage and support the industry with. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Charlie, from being an ambassador and going through some of the learning and being part of the community, are there any particular elements that you found that the Burnt Chef project should be able to, any particular elements that you've liked that would be able to help other organizations or individuals with that you'd like to shout out and recommend?
One big thing that I've always kind of pushed is the awareness side of things, as well as the whole mental well-being side of thing. I can see someone's actually put a comment in which does feature some of the things with, the mental well-being that the Burnt Chef project does teach, with your whole sleep, mindfulness, nutrition, compassion, your digital diet, hydration, all that sort of stuff. Which that's one big thing that the Burnt Chef project definitely taught me. Like, as much as I was aware of the idea of mental well-being, those specific techniques and those certain things to keep in mind regarding it are definitely, that's definitely one big thing that stuck with me the entire time. And other things like how those break down further and more information into sleep and how much even sleep and diet and all those sorts of things actually impact your mental well-being and all that sort of stuff as well. That's two big things that have definitely stuck with me throughout the training.
Nice, thank you, Charlie. And Al?
I think Charlie stole my thunder. I think the main one for me has always been the sleep side of it. I think there's always been that thought that the less amount of sleep made you more as a chef, and the more hours you were doing was an indication of how good a chef you were. And there's just, as Charlie said, there's a lot of things that the Burnt Chef has actually taught me that I actually now use in my day-to-day work and in my personal life. That again, if the Burnt Chef project had existed when I was a chef, especially when I was a younger chef, I think a lot of the times that stress and that pressure that I put on myself would probably have been a lot less. And maybe because and this is something that I've been reflecting on through my career, my stress levels, it always manifested as anger, and I was a very, very angry chef. And then I think that had a lot to do with just your basic nutrition. And as Alki said, exercise. I probably didn't exercise a day in my hospitality career. And I think eating properly is another big one for chefs as well. It's very easy to fall into the trap of not eating properly, and it may just, you may end up realizing you get to the end of the day and you realize that all you've done is drink coffee, energy drinks, and you may have had a few handfuls of cold chips that have been left in the bowl on the pass. That's if the front of house staff hadn't got to the chips first. And more often than not, people would sort of think, well, you know, you're a chef, you know how to cook for yourself. You've probably got the most brilliant diet out of anyone. But you know, more often than not, you know, a trip to McDonald's or KFC would be the meal of choice, and more often than not, that would be well after you know, 10, 11 o'clock at night. That's if you even ate at all. You know, you may even find yourself going home and just and that's another one too. Alcohol intake was another big one for me. That was another way where my stress would manifest into just copious amounts of alcohol, which I probably then was more inclined to have a few drinks rather than actually sitting down and having a decent meal at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's so common, isn't it? I'm just looking through the comments on Instagram at the moment, and all the people that have joined, and they're like, you know, they're resonating so intrinsically with everything that's being said. It's not just a you problem or a them problem. It's an us problem that we've got here, which is, you know, providing the tools and resources to individuals to understand what stress and burnout and the impacts of that is. Also upskilling individuals so that they have the tools and resources available to be able to take care of their own health, you know, because it's not just an employer's responsibility. But I think that there is also an element here, and if any employers are watching, is that actually employers, you've got a big opportunity here to really look after your teams by identifying where these pinch points are, where the high levels of stress are, where burnout is likely to occur within individuals, and doing whatever you can to improve that, not just from a moral obligation, you know, in terms of duty of care, but also from a fiscal point of view as well. This is people's lives, and the happier they are and healthier they are within the workplace, the better they are able to perform, and hopefully the longer they'll stay with you, which is, you know, one of the big things to tackle in hospitality. We've had a few questions. So there was a one that said, you know, is there anything that you can teach a younger member of the team or someone who's just coming into this industry to avoid burnout? And I think we've touched upon a few of the bits, but in summary, are there any particular things that you would advise anyone coming into this industry to avoid those stressful or potential burnout situations?
I think personally, a lot of young chefs come in to the industry just with a head full of wanting to learn as much as they can in the shortest possible time frame. And I think a lot of the times it's very easy to get very overwhelmed very early on. And it's very easy for, I suppose, the older chefs in the team or the managers to notice, well, this guy looks like he's absolutely flying and absolutely coping with everything. Whereas at the same time, he or she may be just trying to do their best they can and try to impress, you know, their peers as quickly as they can, so as they don't feel like they might be a burden to the team, or, you know, slowing the entire team down, because it sort of becomes a bit of a you know, being a sort of a, sorry, I'm struggling. Being a team game, it comes down to trying not to be the weakest link on that team. And I think a lot of the times younger chefs just try to take on too much too early, which I love enthusiasm and I love people that just are so keen to learn. But sometimes you're actually going to learn. It sort of also comes down to the whole breaking things down into smaller chunks, as I said before. Sometimes it's easier to learn a few things at a time rather than trying to learn too much too quickly. And don't take it too seriously, I think, is another one too. I think when Charlie was talking about dancing around the bar, I think a lot of the times we do take it too seriously. And there's always that fine line between where you've got to be serious in the middle of service, but at the same time, you've got to have those moments where you just sort of have a bit of a chance to have a bit of a laugh and things, because sometimes someone just needs a little bit of a laugh to then push them through the next little period of service.
Great, thank you, Al. And Charlie, Elke, was there anything in terms of advice that you can give to someone starting out in the industry to try and help them hopefully boost a little bit of resilience, and also to be able to understand that maybe the pace or the working environment or the way they're feeling, well, the pace or working environment isn't correct and the way they're feeling might be correct, but how to address that?
I was just going to say, focus on what you can control, like as a person, like you can control yourself and things that, like, that routine of exercise, diet, you can control that if you want to, like by, being organized with some meals if you can, but giving yourself time to talk to your chefs that have already gone through what you've done. So I find, like, really, if you get the opportunity to have that kitchen family meal, I found that really key, because that's a talking point to talk to chefs before service. Hopefully they're in a position where they can work with chefs to get that family meal as a team together to talk and reflect on ways of learning and ways to reflect on how to be better at things that they might have found not work. So they might have heard a story where, it happened to them too, so they don't feel bad, and just talk to others that have already done what they're doing for their best tips. And as conversations, like, the more you get to know the people you work with, the more you're going to have fun and laughter and enjoy what you do. I think as a team, it's always good when you're working with someone that gets you. So
Yeah, I agree. That sense of community, right? And again, that's often so overlooked. Yeah, I was chatting to someone the other day who said, it's not like it used to be in kitchens and front of house anymore, where, you were all in battle together and it builds such great bonds. And I was like, well, first and foremost, we're not at battle. We're not at war. We're at war with a carrot or with a Mai Tai or something. We're not here to forge long-lasting bonds as a brother or sisterhood because we've been at war, and I think that's a really clear distinction to make, especially from times gone by. But it is also about building those connections and enjoying the people that you work with and being able to share those stories and those tips. So it's a really good point. Charlie, any final thing from yourself for anyone starting out in the industry?
Definitely encouraging communication is a massive thing. Whether that be as simple, like communication as simple as, hey, we're out of this item, or that sort of communication, to as deep as, if someone's experiencing stress, burnout, anything like that, encouraging them that, it is okay to talk about it, whether that be to a coworker, just encouraging them to talk to a friend about it, or even depending on the situation or how they're feeling about it, talking to a counselor or something like that. Encouraging communication, because that's definitely a massive thing that I've found. There's a culture in New Zealand for sure as well, and I know it is like in different parts of the world, absolutely, like where people won't go talk about it. They're like, oh, it's all right. Whereas actually that's when things bottle up, and encouraging communication definitely from the younger, like any younger staff coming in. That's definitely a big thing to help combat anything, really, not just not just like burnout and stress and anything mental health or even physical related. It will help in any sense.
I agree, and I think from an organizational point of view, again, if anyone is listening to this and they're wondering how they can support others better as well as themselves, is one, consider the actions that you take in terms of leading from example. Often it's do as I say, don't do as I do, which means then that people are looking at you going, well, hold on a sec, if you can do 80-hour weeks and you can drink and smoke and everything else and still have a successful career, then surely I should be able to do that. But also understanding that those regular catch-ups, those one-to-one reviews, a review isn't something that is negative. A review is something that is positive and encouraging and a way of connecting, and also building on previous conversations to find out what is and what isn't working for someone. So, never underestimate that power of connection. I think that's a really, really lovely point on. We've run slightly over our allotted time, obviously due to technical difficulties from all sides of the pond. So I appreciate everyone's patience. And also I'd like to say thank you to Al, Charlie and Elke, and also Nestlé Professional as well for your input and for your support with this conversation. I think it's a real interesting turning point I think we have here in hospitality going on, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing the future. So guys, thank you ever so much.
Thank you, guys. Yeah,
Thank
thanks
you.
so much.
Thank you, guys.